Thank you. Firstly, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a real pleasure.
Superstar. And I hadn't realised before that you worked at Burberry. So we'll come on to that. Go back to the beginning. Let's start by saying this is a really
Yeah.
casual conversation. I know you've got to get off today, Frankie. So your background then, you trained as a designer. Did you always want to be in knitwear?
Yeah, very specifically knitwear. Yes, I think I can remember my first memories when I was, 2, 3 years old. I used to do drawings of ladies with stripy socks and, stripy jumpers. So honestly and truly, yes, I always wanted to be a knitwear designer.
Did you hand knit? Did you start with hand knitting?
A little bit. I've never been great at hand knitting. My grandma was very, very practical, sewing and hand knitting, and I kind of learned how to sew a lot from her. But I think the thing that interested me with knitting is that you're actually creating the fabric. So as soon as I could get on a knitting machine, that's kind of where I wanted to be, because I'm just very impatient as a person, and a knitting machine, you can do it really quickly. So, but I love that idea that you're creating you're not just creating a shape or a garment, you're actually creating the fabric that it's knitted in, and in a way you're kind of knitting a story with the jumper, which I've always found so almost magical. Yeah.
And you studied at Kingston.
Yeah.
It's not far from where I am now, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. What, specialising in knitwear?
Yeah, so I can remember trailing around all the universities at the time, trying to decide wherever I wanted to go, and I settled on Kingston, which was it was a general fashion design course, but then you could specialise once you were on the course. It was a 3-year course, and it had really strong links to industry, which was a real kind of plus, because I think I was a bit kind of worried about, would I get a job at the end of this, because it's such a competitive industry. And the guy that was the course leader at the time was and still is the creative director of Max Mara. So that meant we had great industry contacts and great placements. So, yeah.
Where did you go on your placement?
I went to Max Mara on a placement. And then when I graduated, I moved over to Milan. I had a job working for a knitwear design consultancy in Milan. So that was brilliant.
I went out to Milan as well. When were you? I think you're younger than me, though. When were you in Milan? In the 90s?
Yeah, late 90s. Yeah.
I was there about 94 or something, outside of Milan, though, which was near Como, which was not as cool as being in Milan.
It's a silk industry there, isn't it? It's where they do all the silk scarves.
Yeah. And then at what point did you then get the job for Burberry? Was that after that?
That was a while after that. So I started in Milan, did that for a couple of years, which was a great experience, because we worked for quite a lot of sort of design houses that, like, for example, Gabriella Frattini, Ermenegildo Zegna, menswear. So lots of really good knitwear brands and very luxury kind of knitwear brands, which was a great training. Then I went and worked for Benetton in Treviso. And I used to design the Sisley knitwear collection, which was men's and women's knitwear. And I did that with a lovely team. I started as a junior designer and then worked my way up to senior designer. So I was in Italy for 5 years, and I moved back to Burberry for Christopher Bailey when he'd just taken over. Did that for about 8 years. And I used to design the womenswear London range, which is kind of the ready-to-wear knitwear, women's knitwear range for them. That was brilliant, because we started, most of the collection was then made in Italy. My kind of background was always originally Italian knitwear, because that's where I'd gone and worked for my first job, and I learned Italian, and I'm fluent in Italian, and know all the terminology for knitting in Italian. I absolutely love Italy, so it was nice for me to be able to kind of keep that contact with Italy. And at the time in the UK, there weren't really any knitwear factories in the UK, apart from in the borders in Scotland. At that point, so that was kind of the most common place to get your knitwear made, really, if you were working for a luxury brand.
There would have been, because there was factories in the Midlands, but they were knitting more with acrylic, and then lamb's wool, merino, cashmere in Scotland.
More in the borders, yeah.
John Smedley, obviously, in a fine.
Yes, and we did actually, when I worked for Burberry, we did do a collaboration with John Smedley for a couple of seasons. So I got to work up there in the factory with them, which was fantastic.
So you work with British wool and also Shetland yarn as well. What are the kind of main kind of benefits of using those yarns, and when would you choose one over the other? I went to British wool recently, so I got to see how they grade all the wool.
Yes.
And I now am beginning to understand a little bit more about how complex the whole process is.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
What are the properties of Shetland wool that make it different from your British wool, which is probably maybe a blue-faced Leicester
It's a blend of blueface, Leicester and Masham. So for me, it comes down to the range planning. So I would like to have a range of different textures within the collection. So I started with the British wool, which is the sheepsoft I use, which is from Laxton's, which is this blueface, Leicester and Masham blend, which is a semi-worsted. So it's half worsted, half carded. I've been using that for a while. When I went to look for the Shetland wool, I mean, what I loved about the Shetland wool actually was just the colours that you get and the heathered tones, and I hadn't really found that depth of heathering or colouring melange, if you like, in another yarn, certainly not in another British wool yarn. So that's why I decided to make some of the product out of the Shetland wool, because for me it was very important to get that depth of colour, which I didn't get from the British wool. I got other things in the British wool, but that was that point of difference. So that's why I chose the Shetland wool. And then more recently, I've just incorporated a blend of Wensleydale and Teeswater wool, which is what this one is, which is a worsted spun wool, because again, I didn't have that in the collection. I wanted to have a worsted spun, which looks a bit more like a merino yarn, so it's kind of smoother and silkier, and the stitch definition is kind of better because it's not as fluffy as a carded wool. So that's why I wanted to incorporate Wensleydale wool into the range, because then I've just got a variety of different textures, just to make it, varied, and a point of difference between each product.
Yeah. And where's the worsted wool from? Is that also from Laxton's?
We got this spun probably on a slightly smaller production run than you would get with somebody like Laxton's.
Oh, how exciting. So you're developing your own yarn specific.
Yeah, well, they were kind of developing it, and I spoke to the consultant. I said, I really want to do something in this yarn. I mean, I've been obsessed with these Wensleydale sheep for absolutely ages. They're the ones with the really curly long wool, like poodles. And he said, I think so-and-so's doing something with that. And I said, well, I'd love to do something like that. So he said, well, I think it's only in development phase at the moment. So then I started working with them and, doing swatches to kind of see how it would develop. But then I did a post on Instagram, actually. I was talking about where does a Charl knit start? Does it start with a design? Does it start with a wool? Does it start with a stitch, a shape? Where does it start? And it's not one thing that it starts with, but you do have to really be aware of the wool, because each wool has its own qualities. And for example, this Wensleydale one tried so many different stitches in it, and it didn't like it, and it was lively, and stitches are jumping out, and it was we're just like, oh my god, what are we going to do with this? Everything, different washes, different everything. We tried everything. We had got a pile like this of different swatches, because we're just trying to find the right stitch to match the wool. And then eventually we got there, and it was a real well, thank God, because I'd already bought the wool. I'm like, well, I've got to make it work.
And I think that's what people don't appreciate about knitwear. When I sometimes have someone that I'm working with might say, I want to do a women's wear collection, and it's going to include knitwear, as long as all the other stuff they're doing. And you're like, you realise how technical knitwear is, and I think people quite realise how technical it is. So I think
as long as if you stick with a kind of a basic kind of lamb's wool or merino, you can kind of predict how it's going to react. But then, I've been doing it for 25 years. I like the challenge. And that's one of the reasons why I said, right, I'm going to do this using British wool, and really only British wool, because I really felt very strongly that we should be using British wool. It was a combination of things. I moved back to the UK from Italy, had my kids, moved to the country, moved to Warwickshire. I mean, I'd always lived in London and Norwich before that. And there aren't any, there's not very many sheep in North. There are sheep in North, but there's not that many. Certainly not sheep in London. And I came to Warwickshire, and it's just sheep everywhere. And I was just like, oh my goodness, there's all these sheep. Why don't people use British wool? And I'd, always gone to Pitti Filati as a designer, and you just don't see British wool, you just see lamb's wool, which comes from Australia or New Zealand or wherever. Merino, again, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. And you don't see British wool. I think there might have been like one or two stands, I'm talking 20 years ago or whatever, and you didn't really see it, did you, when you went to trade fairs? And I was like, well, where is it? I've got to use this. And when I looked and did a bit of research at the time, which was kind of 2019, there weren't really very many brands using British wool, and if they were very traditional, and I just thought, like, this needs to be it needs to be kind of made fashionable, made cool. It should be. There's no good reason why it's not. So that's why I really felt like I've got to try and make this work. I couldn't see a reason why it shouldn't work. So I was like, I'm going to make this work. And then, obviously there were other brands that I didn't know, but there were other brands at the same time had similar ideas. But it was the right thing to do, and it is the right thing to do. And it's very satisfying when you can get the stitches to work, get the garments to work, because it's saving an industry, it's saving a piece of British heritage as well. So yeah.
And at that point, 2019, so that's like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Laxton's probably weren't even in their new mill, were they? Or they were by then?
They just moved to the new mill because I went and looked round, yeah.
And that was probably when they first started spinning with British wool.
They did already have sheep soft. So whenever I do start working with a new mill or factory, I always try and go and visit them. And I think that's part of my Burberry training. It's from the times when I used to have to go to China and go and see a factory, and you're like, oh my God, I'm not going to work with, we can't work with them. But yeah, obviously in England, it's not the same.
No. Well, current collection is made in both Italy and the UK. Is that right? You make some pieces in both places.
Yes, I think what I decided when I started the brand was I kind of knew how to get a collection to market, but I didn't know how to take it to the market after I'd got the collection kind of thing. So I had all the industry kind of contacts, the mills that I wanted to work with, factories that I wanted to work with. And I think the lovely thing about working with Burberry at the point that I did was it was quite small when I first started, even though it wasn't small, but actually behind the scenes it was pretty small. And I had a great boss who taught us to own our area, if you like, and mine was the knitwear. So she kind of got me really on board on sourcing factories and doing factory visits, the same with the yarn, the same with selling to the buyers, and also like range planning, everything we were really, really hands-on with. So I'd kind of got factories that I really knew and trusted and felt like they were very transparent, and I had a really good personal relationship with them, because I think it's really important to have that kind of mutual understanding, and it's a teamwork. Everyone needs it to work for the same reasons, and it is a partnership. I actually started with Albion Knitwear in London because I knew Chris there and Jamie really well, and this factory in Italy that I know really well as well because of my kind of experience in Italy. I just wanted to work with two factories that I just thought made the best product. I started with them, and then Albion kind of grew because they'd only recently moved over to the UK from Chris managing the factory in China, and then they got sort of very big very quickly, and they said you might want to work with a smaller factory. And Cora Textiles at the time were a small factory. Now they're not really that small. They're one of the best knitwear manufacturers in the UK. So I started with them just after around lockdown. His mentality is quite rare, I think, for a British manufacturer. He doesn't say, oh no, we can't do that, we've not done that before. He says, I haven't done that, but let's give it a go, and that's what you want. And that's what I'm used to with Italian manufacturers. They will try and do it because they love the product. I don't know, there's a kind of a passion, and they kind of want to kind of go that extra step. And I felt so refreshed when I found John, because I felt like that's what he wants to do, and that's what British manufacturing needs to do if it wants to keep up with the competition. So I was very excited to start working with them, and they're really they're really great. They're really, really great. And so the collection has just evolved working with those two knitwear factories. I would say most of it's made in the UK because it's much easier for me to go and develop product down the road in Nottingham. It's only an hour from where I live. It's harder with Brexit as well to kind of make in Italy, because there's a lot of kind of bureaucracy about sending things backwards and forwards, and so it's easier to work with the UK. But then at the same time, I think it's important to possibly not have all your eggs in one basket with any kind of collection. It's nice to have a couple of options in case anything bottlenecks in one factory, you've got the option of the other factory. So I was keen to keep two manufacturers.
So where is the factory in Italy, and what was the difference in the techniques or the type of knitwear that the factory in Italy and also the one in the UK?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I think it's good to have two different factories that can do different things. So the factory in Italy is in Perugia. So Italy they do different kinds of knitwear products in different regions.
Like we do here,
and Perugia used to be the heart of the cashmere kind of knitting industry. It's where Cariaggi and people like that come from. And I think it's rumoured that originally it's because the water from the River Tiber, which runs there, is softer, and so that it was kind of better for washing the cashmere, making it really, really soft. But that's the kind of knitwear that they used to knit there back in the 60s, I suppose, 50s and 60s. But so there's quite a few knitwear factories there. I work with a factory there, and they're kind of a smaller factory, and then they have a kind of a laundry or a wash house that they work with, which is they're kind of like a little cooperative of there's various different knitters, but each kind of little business does one part of the design out of the manufacturing process. So
right.
Whereas in Cora everything happens under one roof.
Yeah, the linking, the knitting, the washing.
Yeah. There it's much smaller. Each person does a different thing. So, but they're all very close to each other. So it kind of passes around like that.
So a little bit more like Hoik, like in the Scottish borders.
Yes, although I don't really have much experience of working with Scotland, but I think yes, it is a bit more like that. Yeah.
Interesting. So is the technique that they do in Italy, is it the same, or do you choose different yarns? Do you have European yarns? I'm keen to kind of learn.
Yeah, so I try to work with the UK with the British yarns as much as I can, and then with Italy with the more kind of Italian spun or European yarns, just obviously because of kind of transportation reasons. It makes more sense to do that. I tend to do the kind of more finer gauge things in Italy and the kind of chunkier things in the UK, but that's also because British wool tends to be a bit chunkier, so that's what I'm making in the UK, obviously, because it hasn't got as far to travel, and the Italian kind of yarn tends to be finer, so that's how I kind of separate it out. But then, there's the challenge with British wool that you kind of want to make it as soft as possible, and sometimes my Italian factory has a different way of finishing it to the way that it's finished in the UK, so it's swings and roundabouts, but it's just nice to have the option of the two.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out, for someone listening to this, if they want to develop a knitwear collection, which way should they go? What would be the benefit? I obviously know what I think the benefits are of living in the UK, but if they, are there certain benefits at times when it's worth, with your knitwear consultant hat on, you'd say actually that is better doing that in Italy, whereas that is better doing that in the UK.
I think obviously from a carbon footprint point of view and sustainability, it's always going to make more sense to make the product. If we're using a British or Shetland wool, it's always going to make more sense to make that out of the UK from a kind of air miles perspective, if you like.
Of interest, what's the difference do you find in the price? Is the manufacturing cost, the labour cost in Italy and the UK now pretty much on a par?
It's very similar. I'm sure different factories kind of charge for development in different ways. Some people will factor it into the production price. Some people will charge more for kind of samples. Some people will charge for development, whereas some people will just put that all into the swatches and things, and whereas other people will put that into the prototype development, or they might charge you more for the photographic samples. So, but it kind of averages out about the same.
Are you not tempted when you see people like Kate at Uber's Knitwear to think, I quite like my own machine?
I think what I feel like now is that I think it's really important to the skills that I've got, I have to use those to the best of my ability, because that's my unique selling point. So I feel like I come from that quite sort of luxury fashion background. So I keep trying to push that kind of that angle, and trying to sort of reinterpret the heritage kind of stitches and stories, and making them kind of cool. That for me, I see that as being the thing that I need to do, because that's the thing that I'm most. I mean, I love what Kate's doing. I don't know where I get enough hours in the day to be able to do my own collection and then do. I mean, I'd love to have some more knitting machines that I could just, I mean, I've got a brother knitting machine. I'd love to have some more knitting machines to be able to do the trials, but I don't know if I'd have the time to do the trials. And I think it's the hard thing is with your own business, isn't it? It's just working out which bit you need to do and which bits you can ask other people to do for you. So, I mean, I love telling the story. I love finding new stitches, but then I find that I love the challenge of using the British wool, which is not an easy material to use by any means. That Wensleydale one, for example, I couldn't find that anywhere. So I managed to get that, developed.
So where are you getting your Wensleydale yarn spun?
So Europa Wools have got a new range of British wools. So they're worth looking at and working with. They're very helpful and proactive.
So have you been up to Shetland?
No, I'm trying to get up to Shetland. I think it's quite tricky to get up to Shetland. It's quite funny when I speak to them on the phone, and if there's been bad weather, the ferry doesn't leave, so the wool gets delayed. Yes, I would love to get up to Shetland. Definitely, it's on the cards. It's on the plans. But like I said to you earlier, I've got 2 boys, so it's kind of just trying to kind of schedule that in, or try and take them with me. But I don't know if they've got very good football pitches in Shetlands, so they might not be keen.
How old are your kids?
Mine are 12 and 13, or
And
nearly
how old
12
is
and
the
13.
business?
The business is 2020. I officially launched it. So
So
yeah.
6 years ago. So
Yes.
you said to me before we started recording that, having the kids whilst launching the business has been a bit of a juggle to do.
Yeah. Yes, I think I was really aware from having had lots of friends in who started their own businesses and then consulting for other brands, small brands, that starting a business can take over your life. And that might not be compatible with having a young family. I'd kind of nearly started a business before I had the boys, and then put it on hold because I just, couldn't do the two. Lots of my friends had kind of advised me to kind of wait until the boys were a bit older so that I could enjoy them being young and being babies. And, I think that was really, really sound advice. I had the idea in my head until the youngest one started school when he was, nearly 6. And then I was kind of really had a very strong idea about what I wanted to do. I had time to really kind of research it really well so that I felt like it was, something worth doing. I think the other thing is, isn't it, when you've got children, if you're going to go into a job or you're going to start your own business, you want it to be something that's worth doing, so that if it's time away from your children, then it's not kind of wasted time. It's meaningful things that you're spending your time doing. So I think, I was just very kind of aware of the time that I had with them and how much time I got and how to kind of balance that and between my two passions, my children and my work.
So is that where the name Charl comes from? Is one of your kids called Charlie by
No, my sister's called Charl. So my sister, when I used to work for Burberry and when I used to work for Benetton, she used to always wear a test everything for me and give me a really honest opinion. And I like to think she's kind of my commercial head, if you like. I can kind of get swept away with an idea and, might not be the most wearable thing. She always brings me back down to earth. And is it practical? Is it wearable? Who's going to wear this? So it was kind of, a kind of nod to her, really, the Charl thing. Although my eldest child is called Charlie as well, so I don't know, Charlotte, Charles, Charlie.
So she's the one that says, no, it's too itchy, you need to make it softer.
Oh my God, my sister can't even wear wool. She waits for me to do the merino cotton things in the summer and then she wears those. She's the most fussy customer.
Let's talk about that. You just mentioned like the stuff you do in the summer, because one of the challenges is for any seasonal business like knitwear is that it's considered, for the most part, a cold weather item. So how, as a small business owner, do you make that work in terms of cash flow and sales and marketing
Very
so
tricky.
that you can fill the summer months?
So I do a cotton and merino blend, an organic cotton and responsible wool. What's the S for? I've forgotten. Standard. So I use that in the summer. I mean, I do British wool in the summer as well, like a lighter weight. But then for people that don't want an actual wool jumper, I offer the cotton and merino option. And I'm working on a new yarn for this summer, which is a European flax and organic cotton blend, which is much lighter weight as well.
Oh, nice. A flax and cotton.
Yes.
Wow. I wish we'd grown more flax in the UK. We used to
I know
so much of it.
Yeah. I think it's the same, isn't it? It's the alpaca. I think that we are starting to produce these things now, and it's just kind of, just needs to get it a little bit further, a bit grow it a bit more so that people can use it more confidently in production runs. Yeah.
And I've noticed as well that you've started to do some non-knitwear products on your label, linen as well. So is that also to kind of fill the downtime in the summer a little bit?
Well, it's cottons, but yes, it is basically. I think I'd find it difficult to dress head to toe in knitwear, if I'm being honest. So, I mean, realistically, you're going to wear something that isn't knitwear on your bottom half. And I love knitted dresses, but knitted dresses in the summer sounds quite hot. They're quite tricky to wear. So it was kind of a natural progression from that. And I think I really love cultural history. So when I left Burberry, I went and did a master's in museum studies and kind of cultural history. And I really became fascinated in kind of costume history. Although that's also something that's quite interesting for Burberry, because obviously we always used to go into the archives when we were designing the collections. So that's kind of another part of my interest, I think, this costume history and sort of social history aspect, which also kind of comes through from the fisherman's Guernsey jumpers, which are the inspiration behind my collection. But it was that I was also interested in the other things that they wore and the things that the wives wore, and so that's why I kind of I wanted to incorporate these woven things into the spring summer collection. So the dress that I do, I looked at the kind of original Edwardian kind of workwear clothes, the little round sort of Peter Pan collars that are on the men's shirts. And I sourced a really fantastic factory that I work with, who used to make the original sails and the original maritime outfitters, Yarmouth Oilskins, and they manufacture for other brands. So I asked them if they would consider, making some pieces for me. So that's where I get my woven pieces made, which is really exciting. When you go and see their factory in Yarmouth on the quay, I don't know if you've been there. Have you been there?
I haven't. I used to exhibit at my event, but I've not yet been to their factory.
Oh, you have to go there. It's the original factory where they used to make all the sails. So they've got the sail room where they used to make the sails, and on the top floor is where all the seamstresses are, because the light's best there. That's where they sew everything. So it's just got so much history to it, and they've got their way of working, and they make everything and put like a little pack together of all the pieces, the pattern pieces cut out with all the trims and components, and they sort of tie it in a little bit of scrap fabric in a bow, and then it gets handed to somebody that's going to make it all. Then they take it away, and then they make it all. And so to have the wovens made in Norfolk is wonderful. So there's a new pair of trousers for this spring summer. There's a big shirt dress that I did last spring summer, and I've kind of just refined that, so it's just a little bit longer and a little bit narrower this season. A sailor smock top, and there'll be a big sort of tote bag, all in a kind of lovely heavy cotton candy stripe.
Brilliant. So you're from Norfolk originally then?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It all makes sense now then.
Yeah, and I always knew about the fishermen's Guernseys in Cornwall and in Scotland and in the Channel Islands, and I just thought, what about the Norfolk ones? I knew there were the Norfolk ones. I can remember going and seeing them in the museums when I was at school, and I just thought, but it's a really important story, and I really want to tell that story. And I think really coming from Burberry, where we only ever did things if they had a connection to the Burberry brand, I really learnt that working there. And I think it's so important not to just create things for the sake of creating things because they've got a real story and a kind of real connection to our heritage. That's what I love doing at Burberry, and that's what I wanted to do in my own collection, because I didn't want to create more stuff. I just wanted to create things that had a reason for being here. And that's kind of the way of justifying creating new things. There's so much overproduction, but I wanted to create things that would have a story and that meant something to people and that would last and be kind of treasured. And yeah, that for me, that was the story worth telling, and that's the thing worth doing, at the same time as raising my children. It's kind of justifying it, and it that kind of made sense to me, and it felt like an important thing to do.
So you don't think you'll ever go back for working for someone like Burberry again?
I don't think anyone would have me now. I think you kind of get so set in your own ways when you're in your own business, in chaotic ways, probably, idiosyncratic ways. I don't know how I would go back and work for anybody else, because I have to kind of really fit in. I do an hour here, an hour there. When the boys are back from school, I'm taking them to places, and then I sort of fit in another hour. So I don't know how easy it would be to work for anyone else at the same time as juggling a family. I think anyone that can do it, I just hats off to them, because it's such a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm also totally unemployable now. I couldn't go back to working for any, big corporate business and having to have a boss. Gosh, no, couldn't do that.
I think it's that mum brain thing, when you put on the spot and you're like, I think I do believe in the mum brain, when you just have that brain fog. And then I just don't know if I could get back into being that kind of switched on again at all times to be able to answer any question about any kind of sales figures or anything. I just think I'm not sure if I could do it anymore.
I think it's also how unflexible big companies, even if it is, someone like Burberry. When I worked at Debenhams, which was my last job, and I just had my daughter, and I asked to go down to 4 days a week, and they said, well, you might be able to do 4.5, which basically meant getting Friday afternoon off.
Yeah.
In about 6 months' time, which basically is a no, but we're not allowed to say a total no, so we'll just give you fob you off with something. At that point, I just stormed into my boss and went, right, that's it, I'm leaving, without actually thinking of what I was going to do next. why I find
Good for
myself
you.
here today. Oh, brilliant. Oh, it's Frankie. It's been really lovely talking to you. What an amazing story about your brand.
It's lovely to talk to you, Kate. Thanks for having me.
Before you go, just tell everyone, where can they find you? What's your website address?
So it's charlknitwear.co.uk.
Amazing. Right. Thank
or
you very
Charl
much.
Knits on Instagram.
Oh, Knits on Instagram. Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.